Hi everyone, it's Mike with the Astro Explorers. Tonight's video is going to be on how to align your Celestron NexStar 8SE to the stars. The main reason we want to do this is so that we can use the go-to functionality of the telescope mount. And that is probably the main reason most of us got this as our starter telescope, is so that we can tell the computer what we want to look at. So in order to do that, what we're going to have to do is actually align it with two stars. And then once it's aligned, we'll be able to use that go-to functionality. And then the second benefit of that is, as we've noticed in the previous video, everything is moving across the night sky. So the telescope is actually going to track those objects in the night sky with it. So we'll point it, and if you watch it over the night, those objects will slowly drift across the sky, and the mount is going to do that as well. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you three different ways of aligning the telescope. There's a couple different options. One is just using the telescope along with the handheld controller. There's a second option where we can actually use a Wi-Fi dongle and use that to connect to our phone. And then the third option is connecting our laptop to the telescope. So make sure you watch to the end, that way you can see all three options, and then see if you can take a guess what option I'm going to recommend and which option I use the most of. The first option I'm going to show you tonight is how to use the handheld controller that is attached to your telescope mount. So you don't need any extra equipment for this. Everything came with your telescope. And what we're going to do is what's called two-star alignment. Now, if you check the description below, I am going to go ahead and provide a web link. And that web link is going to have everything listed out on what I'm doing tonight, so that you can see step by step, or you can follow along with this video. Either is perfectly good. And then also in the description, I'm going to have listed the best stars to use for which month it is. So go ahead and check the description. You'll see what stars that you can use, and then I'll show you the next step here momentarily after I fight this plane. Oh my goodness, there is another plane. Alright, so if you haven't seen my previous video on how to set up your Celestron NexStar 8SE, and if you have any questions on that, go ahead and check the link right here. That way you can view that video, get it set up, and then once you're done with that, come back to this video and I'll show you how to do that alignment. Alright, so the first step in getting the alignment for your Celestron NexStar 8SE set up is actually making sure that your telescope mount is level and on firm ground. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend setting it up on a wooden deck like I have right now. Every time I move on this deck, it does vibrate and move slightly. So normally I would set up in the grass, but just for video purposes, it's easier to set it up, and we're not doing any actual capturing right now. So in real world, when you're doing this, make sure you are on firm concrete, firm ground. You don't want to be walking around having your deck flex as you move, because that will throw off your alignment. But your Celestron NexStar should have come with a little bubble level. So what you want to do is just make sure that you're using your level as you're setting up your telescope. I like to put it right here in the center. And what you want to do is try to get the bubble in the center of the red circle. And the easiest way to do that is either have just something flat you're setting your telescope on, or you're adjusting the legs to move the legs in and out to adjust it to be level. Now, this deck is pretty level. I have the bubble currently in the center of the red line, so we're going to stay with that, and then we're going to go ahead and work on the next part of aligning our telescope. Alright everyone, so now with your telescope leveled, what you're going to want to do is go ahead and grab your hand controller. And once your telescope's on, it's going to say NexStar SE, and it's going to say press enter to begin alignment. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and push that enter key here. And then it's going to ask, what kind of alignment do you want to do? If yours does not pop up showing auto 2-star, and auto 2-star is what we want, what you're going to want to do is go ahead and use the buttons right here, the down button and up button. And you can see when I push those, it's going to change based off of which direction I go. So we've got 2-star alignment, 1-star alignment, solar system, equatorial north alignment, south, sky align, and auto 2-star. So again, what we're looking for is the auto 2-star alignment, and we're going to go ahead and push enter. Okay, so after choosing 2-star auto alignment, it's going to ask your location. And you do have the option to choose from a city database, or again, if you push the down button, you'll see that it then asks for a custom site. I'm going to go ahead and choose custom site. That way I put in my GPS data location. That's going to give me much better tracking, as it'll be exact on my spot. But if you want to choose city, if your city is listed in the database, feel free to do that as well. Once I've entered that custom site information with my GPS data, then I'll show you the next step from there. Okay, now that I have my location data entered into the hand controller, it's asking what time it is. And this is of course important because it doesn't know what time of day it is, and it wouldn't know what time or where the stars are in the night sky without that information. So I'm going to go ahead, enter that information in next, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, so the next thing it's going to ask is what time we're in right now. And that doesn't mean is it 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, but they're asking, are we in standard time or are we in daylight savings time? Now this confused me for the longest time, and with that I finally figured out that it's asking not if I'm in an area that acknowledges daylight savings and works with that, but if it is currently in daylight savings or not. So here in Texas, daylight savings just ended at the start of November. So I would not choose daylight savings, I would choose standard. And then here in March, it'll roll back over to daylight savings time. So then I would choose daylight savings. So if you're confused, easiest thing to do is just type into Google, is it currently daylight savings time? And Google will tell you, yes it is, or no it is not. If it is, choose daylight savings. If it's not, choose standard time. And to switch between these two, you're going to use the same buttons, the up and down. And then once you've chosen, then choose enter. So I'm choosing standard time, and I'm going to choose enter, since we have just left daylight savings time a week ago. Okay, and then the next thing we're going to do is it's going to ask what date it is. So I'm going to go ahead and put that information in and then show you the next step. Now that I've put the date in, it's asking what I want to use for my first star. So what I want to do is I want to look at that list that I have in the description, see what month it is, and I'm seeing that I need to look for Altair and Vega. So the first one I'm going to choose is Altair. I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm going to center my telescope on that star. All right, so you're probably saying, hey Mike, how am I supposed to know where Altair or Vega are? I bought this telescope because it said it's a go-to. Why am I having to find my own stars? Well, unfortunately, the telescope, while being very smart, needs a little bit of help from us. But we do have tools to help us find those stars in the night sky. So what I use and would recommend is go ahead and find you a sky software or app that you can download on your phone. What I use is the Celestron Sky Portal app, and it has a fun compass mode on it. And with that, you can use your cell phone, point it, and it'll show you what's in the night sky. The other option you can do with it is actually search for a star or another object in the night sky, and it'll show you where it is. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to use my cell phone to locate the stars in the night sky, and then I'm going to use my handheld controller to go ahead and point the telescope and align those stars and center them in the telescope eyepiece. Okay, so here we are in Celestron Sky Portal, and what we're doing is we're currently in compass mode. So if I raise my phone up, it goes up. If I look to the left, look to the right, it's following along with me. And what I want to do is find Altair. So I can see that it's over here in the west. So I'm going to go back into compass mode. I'm going to point, and I can zoom in, go back into compass mode, and I can see in the night sky, now using my eyes, now that I know that I'm kind of pointed in the right direction, where that star is. So now that I know where it is, I'm going to use my handheld controllers on the Celestron mount to go ahead and have my scope point in that direction. Alright, so we can see that my telescope is currently pointed in the wrong direction. It's currently kind of pointed in the northeast direction, and what we want to do is point it west. And over here you can see Altair. So I am going to use my handheld controller to slew the scope over at Altair and try to zero it in inside of the red dot finder. So if you've not turned on your red dot, you'll want to go ahead and do that. And then just if you have questions on how the red dot works or how slewing the telescope works, go ahead and refer back to the previous video. But what I'm going to do is go ahead and just grab my handheld controller, and I'm going to use the left arrow, and I'm going to slew it over here to the west. And that just might take a minute, as it's not the fastest in the world, but we'll get there eventually. Alright, so now that we have it pointed west, and it looks like we are pointing pretty close to the star, I'm going to go ahead and lower the telescope and try to get Altair lined up in the finder telescope. So we can see it here, and we can see that we are getting real close to having it aligned in our finder scope. So now that it's aligned, I'm going to check the eyepiece and make sure the star is also centered in the eyepiece. Okay, I know this is going to be very hard to see, but you can see the star there on the screen in my camera. And what I'm trying to do is get it centered in my eyepiece. And when I do that, what I want to do is use as my last options up and to the right. And that's going to take any slack in those cables. So it's always important that you're going up and to the right when doing your alignments. That way you remove that slack. Okay, so here we have Altair, which we were pointing at. And then we'll look over here to the right, and you'll see that blinking plane that's flying by. And unfortunately, Altair just went behind those clouds. I don't know if you can see it or not, but you can just barely make it out. So we'll give it a couple minutes as these clouds are going through the night sky, and then we'll slew the telescope over to it, align, and then pick back up with the rest of the tutorial. Okay, so after we have centered Altair in our eyepiece, it's going to ask us to align the star. So what we'll do is we'll click the align button. I'm just going to double check, make sure that it's still center, and then I'll choose align. And then after I choose align, it's going to ask me what the next star I want to choose. Now it's pretty smart. We knew we wanted to go to Vega. We're going to choose Vega, and after we choose it, the telescope is actually going to start slewing over to Vega to try to get it in the proper location. So I'm going to hit enter. And you can see that the telescope is automatically moving over to where it believes Vega is. And if you look, we should see Vega there in the night sky. And we're pointing pretty close to it. Let me check to see how. Yeah, we're pointing just a little bit down through the finder scope. So I'm going to go ahead and align it in the finder scope, and then also get it aligned in the eyepiece. Okay, now that I have Vega centered in my eyepiece, I'm going to choose align. All right, quick pause here. So what you're seeing on the handheld controller is that the alignment was successful, and it's also reminding us to turn off the StarPointer. So you'll want to turn that off, and then with the alignment successful, we'll be able to choose what objects in the night sky we want to look at. So I'll go ahead and resume the video from here. All right, so after the successful star alignment, the 2-star auto alignment, I went ahead and tested out the alignment and chose Mars, and was able to have the telescope slew over the Mars. And I'll go ahead and show you how that works. Right now, we are tracking Mars, but what I'm going to do is on our handheld controller, you can choose solar system, and in here you can use the up and down buttons to choose an object in the solar system. So there's Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, the moon. So let's go ahead and tell it to go to the moon. So we have moon chosen. We're going to choose enter. And now you can see that we are moving the telescope to focus on the moon. And if we look through our finder telescope, we are on the moon. And then if we look in our eyepiece, you can see that big bright object there pointing in the moon. Now, I have found that this is not 100% perfect, but with that, it does get you on spot, on location, and then just with a little bit of manual control, it'll typically be very easy to get the object centered in your eyepiece. So again, we're currently pointing at the moon. We have the moon showing here on our hand controller. I'm going to choose a different object. So we have Mars there. Here's Jupiter. Let's go ahead and just go back to Mars. And I'll push enter. And our hand controller is going to go ahead and tell our telescope to point at Mars. So if we look, there's Mars in the distance right there. And if we look through our telescope, you'll see that plane coming by. And then you'll see the finder is very close to Mars. So again, we can just slew the telescope ever so slightly to get on point. And then if we look through the eyepiece, we can see Mars there in our eyepiece. So I'm not sure if you'll be able to see that, but yeah, there is Mars right there in the eyepiece. Okay, so that is how to use the 2-star auto alignment on your Celestron NexStar 8SE. You don't need to have anything else other than your telescope. And with that, we were able to align off of 2 stars and then use the go-to functionality to see Mars, the moon, and I was also able to go ahead and see Jupiter, Uranus, and then try to get Saturn, but unfortunately it did get below the horizon line tonight, so I wasn't able to see that. With that, unfortunately, we do have some clouds rolling in, so I'm not going to be able to do the other 2 options tonight. So go ahead, keep an eye out for that video. But in the meantime, if you do have any questions, comments, or tips or tricks that you'd like to share from your experience using the Celestron NexStar 8SE, be sure to leave those in the comments below. Otherwise, clear nights and happy sky hunting.